So first I need to clarify where the name comes from. And yes, it's a very popular Austrian name. Obviously, there used to be a race driver, right, with that name. And interestingly, that was the reason I don't own the domain lauder.com, right? Because his cousin is not selling it to me. I offered him 150,000 euro already, which is, I think, a significant sum, but he refused to sell to me. Interestingly, Lauder is not linked to the family name. It's linked to a small town where Lauder is located in the south west of Germany, actually near between Stuttgart and Frankfurt. And for those of you who know Germany a bit better, you might have heard of a city called Würzburg. It's a okay, interested. There's a fortress, and it's a nice city. It's not big, but it has like 40,000 students and 120,000 inhabitants. So every third person is a student, which always makes the city quite lively and a worth place to live in. So my company has about 520 people. So yeah, it's not super big. It's not tiny though. It has a tradition of almost 60 years. So my grandfather created it in 1956. We're creating very precise temperatures. That is my mantra. So it's actually, I can give you any temperature you need. So we're coming from a chemical lab. You might, I mean, Mario, I guess, knows it very well. So if you want a chemical reaction, you need, in some cases, a very precise temperature. When the reaction is taking place, you might cool down to get back to a stable state. So actually, this is where my company comes from the chemical lab. But now we are in various industries, including semiconductor, medical applications, and the automotive industry, particularly in electric cars, which is very favorable in these days, right? Mm-hmm. We have like a growth of 5 to 6% every year, which is quite good. But I was looking for something more. So I got in touch with the Silicon Valley because I acquired a company in 2014. And the cradle of that company is in the San Jose area because it provides very constant temperatures to the semiconductor industry. They moved further north to Vancouver, Washington, but the CEO still lived there. So I spent some time in Silicon Valley, went to Stanford for some executive courses. And one day I got my visa, which is great because I made a significant investment in the US. So, and one day I asked my wife, hey, what about moving to the US for a year, right? And she was, yeah, great. Why not? And my son was 14 at that time. He also was pretty excited to go to a German school in Silicon Valley. So yeah, that's what we did from actually 2017, July 2017 to like September 2018. So during that year, actually I had a mission, and my mission was to learn about innovation, to learn actually how innovation is done in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, I have a PhD in innovation, so I have an MBA kind of diploma, but Silicon Valley obviously is a particular place. So I tried to investigate a bit and met various people, maybe 100 people are also known to Mario, I guess, when you look at our LinkedIn list. Like, I think I met you at a Burton Lee lecture, right, at Stanford, Mario. and there are some guys who we know, like Matthias Hohensee, for example, and others. So what is my main message, how I deal with innovation at Lauder? First, I do believe you cannot do exponential innovation in your current organization. So I really encourage to split off a separate entity dealing with exponential innovation. There are some people who see pros and cons. I do believe it's a good thing to do, but it's very important to link it to your ordinary business, right? To give it enough freedom on the one hand, but also find some close ties to your regular business at the same time. So my mission in Silicon Valley was to learn to keep my business running. So 6 hours a day from 7 to noon, I took care of my regular business. So it was not a sabbatical. But the rest of the day, basically in the afternoon, I met people to learn, and the final outcome was that outpost Mario mentioned, like an innovation lab, and it's based at Plug and Play in Sunnyvale, right? At a co-working space. I mean, it's a little bit more. It's an accelerator mainly. It's also a place where corporates try to meet the startups of the future. That's actually, I think, where they make most money off. It's not so much renting out places. So I think Plug and Play is a great business idea. And we are not using their corporate programs because, frankly, I think it's too expensive. But we are using their office space to kind of get in touch with the ecosystem, right? To use another buzzword you might have heard of. Yeah. So first, we worked on some innovation areas which I thought might be interesting. One of them was mobile temperatures. I mean, I'm dealing with temperatures. But they're not mobile yet, right? They're stationary, they need an electric plug. So when you talk about mobile, obviously batteries come into the game. So actually we are like industrializing one project, and we want to launch it in January next year at CES. Unfortunately, CES will be virtual only because I already booked a booth in the Eureka Hall, Mario. I was super excited to be like amongst all these startups. So it will be a virtual event somehow, but the launch is planned for January. So one idea we are trying to commercialize. And as it is not in our current core business, I have to work thoroughly on a launch strategy, right? There are various ways to do it. Maybe we can talk about it later. And on the other hand, and that's the last thing I want to mention before opening discussion to you guys, I have been working on an ideation tool, actually to gather all the ideas which are currently existing in my company, right? So the main like mantra is everybody is innovative to a certain extent. For some people, like a rather small idea might matter a lot. I always talk about people in the shop floor moving their working bench half a meter to the right. Is that an innovation? Not really, but for that person, it matters a lot because he might be more efficient, right? He can do more. So for him, it's a big thing. And on the other hand, they are the moonshots, right? Exponential innovation, things people never thought of, just to give the full scope of innovation, how we deal with it. And I talk about certain dilemmas. You might want to catch up with my LinkedIn articles. Today, there's an interesting feature in the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany. I think, Mario, that's how you kind of contacted me. And I talk about dilemmas. One is like the funnel dilemma. If you filter innovation too early, you get loss of the big ideas. So we do not filter. Actually, we're using a chatbot. There's a little bit of artificial intelligence involved. I think, Marcus, you just asked a question in the previous session how to apply AI. So we are actually, it's an algorithm. And there's an algorithm, and there's a question and answer tool. And then the idea is put on the right track. I call it track. We have 20 tracks in our company to deal with that innovation. But when the track is not correct, it's kind of a self-learning tool as well, because it's based on Google Analytics. And so then the idea is on the right track, and we deal with it in the proper place. And one track, obviously, is the innovation lab, which is based in Silicon Valley, in Sunnyvale. I will create another outpost in Germany as well, just for some pragmatic purposes. But I still do believe I need the spirit of Silicon Valley as an integral part of my company, right? It's expensive, but it's worthwhile. There's a really good ecosystem there we can use to really foster exponential ideas. Mario, I think is that fine for the beginning? I'm really excited to learn from you guys and from your experience to pivot or to kind of work on my personal mission, right? Because it's not ready. I mean, there are several books. I like Mario's books particularly. There are others as well, but there's no blueprint how to deal with innovation, right? So I want to actually walk my own path and try to push my company forward. Mm-hmm. Thanks for your attention.
So Gunther, I find it always fascinating because normally what we hear is only about these large companies coming there, you know, the Daimlers and the BMWs and the Siemens and so on, and having innovation outposts there. But it's a rather rare to see really a smaller business. They're definitely not the elephant in the room, yeah, moving and doing something in Silicon Valley. So there seems to be a value in that for you. Have you ever seen that translating? Do you feel resistance from your? I mean, you're the CEO, so they have to do anyways what you say, yeah. But
I do have shareholders as well.
But then, of course, you may see people who are more willing or more interested in that, or some more skeptical. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two special things you mentioned. First, I was pretty exotic in Silicon Valley, right? Because I was not from one of these large corporates you mentioned. I mean, you meet them all. If your son is going to GSSV, you know, they're all the parents there. So you mingle with them and say, who are you? Why are you here, right? Who sent you? I said, myself. Wow, that's pretty cool. So I was not one of these large corporates, nor I was a startup, right? It was somehow German Mittelstand. We like that word a lot. You might translate it to SME, like small, medium enterprises, right? But we are very proud of the German Mittelstand. So that was exotic. I was also relatively early, right? So in July 2017, German economy was at full speed. Right, so nobody really was willing to talk about exponential innovation because the regular business was running really well. Now it's a different time, right? I don't know how you feel about it, but now people want to learn more about what should I do, right? I have no business anymore. For some companies, it might be a little bit too late. So I was like somehow in between, not really big, not really large. I was, from my perspective, relatively early, and I spoke to my team relatively early, right? So maybe because you asked about was there any resistance within the company, right? So I speak about innovation for like 4 or 5 years because it's important, and I always like to use the example of a human being, right? Because actually human beings die, right? Our ancestors died at the mid of their 30s. Now you might die at your 80 or something. But why can a company be older than a human being? I think that's an interesting question, right? And my answer always is because they readapt, they change the business model continuously. And if you look at companies, what they did in their early days and what they do now, there's a lot of pivoting, right? Even in mature companies. And that's innovation, right? You have to think about your business of the future. And if I tell my story a bit, and I really like to address that story to the worker at the workbench, they understand. Right, so that's a really important audience. On the other side, there might be my shareholders who have their PhDs. In some cases, I mean, have a very various group of shareholders, and they want to say, hey, why you cut my profit by $500,000, right? And I say, yeah, because I want to take care of the profit of the future, right? And this is how to invest in innovation. And as luckily my shareholders have a long-term perspective. Some of them are in their 80s, but they think about their kids, their children. So they do have, luckily, a long-term perspective. They're willing to invest in innovation.
Any other questions? The audience.
Well, I'd like to make an observation in that the word of you're not a big company, you're a small company is almost like apologizing. And Mario, you were talking about big companies and small companies. For me, I don't know why we do that. And I think that might be one of the mindsets which we get caught up in over what is good, you know, big or small, you know, bless, it's almost small, it's in the kindergarten, and big companies are, you know, adults. I'm intrigued, Gunther. You've seen so many different organizations in your journey. Do you think there's an optimal size for a particular organization with a niche? So yours is temperature, you know?
Correct.
But if you're going to innovate, you might become fluids. So would that be 2 500 people organizations, or would you pivot the whole thing across? I'm just intrigued as to where you see.
That's a great question. I never felt being a small company in Silicon Valley, because there are companies of 1 or 2 people, right? Actually, a startup is a small company. They would never call themselves a small company. They tell, we have like 10,000 customers or something, right? They always talk about future potential, which is a big difference to German companies who always like make themselves a little small. Oh, not so fast, right? I want to grow steadily. Please don't give me money. I'm bootstrapped. So that's an interesting question. I never felt being small because my market is so big, right? Temperature matters in so many aspects, and I can talk for hours, which I don't. But I want to refer to your question about an optimum size. I think that's going to the depths of like economics or business administration, but I do have an opinion. I think there's no future for big companies anymore, right? Because companies have to learn to become small again, and I'm pretty sure Mario won't disagree to that, because there's a buzzword we all hate, and it's agile, right? But I'm using it because I want to use it in a proper meaning, not talking just about Scrum and these fancy stuff. Talk about how to make an organization agile, right? And then you really have to cut like a big organization in small self-steering agile entities. Might be a 2-pizza team or something like that, but it has to be a small entity to be more dynamic, right? To respond to the needs of the market, which is very, very unpredictable. So I think my question was, there's no future for big companies anymore. I love big companies. I like to have more resources. And another observation is, I mean, I really met people from large companies, from like ZF, like automotive suppliers, right? Mercedes, Roche, big companies, and I haven't found anything they're doing better than I do. Yeah. I mean, that's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but I want to make my point, right? What I found big companies do, they do fancy hackathons with a lot of students somewhere overnight. They give them free drinks, pizza. They have like 10,000 ideas. Then they ask the business unit managers to select the ideas. Guess what? They select the ideas which are very close to their core business. And all the rest, that's interesting, but we have no idea about the market, so let's get rid of that, right? And so I thought this is a wrong approach, and everybody did it that way. Everybody I met. And so I wanted to do it a little bit differently, to have like my own way to do it, which is no hackathons, no fancy stuff, hard work, like, and rather than filtering, I introduce, and that's a little bit my mantra. I talk about the ideas of tracks, right? Innovation tracks. So yeah.
Yeah, I think doing it with a small company, and I come back to the term, Marcus, small company, I think it is a larger investment, because you don't have that many resources like a large company that sends 2 people over there. But the thing is, if you make this investment, it has a much larger impact, because a family-owned business like a Lauda can much quicker turn around the thing and make decision and move more agile. So I'm always wondering why we do not see more companies like Lauda being in the Silicon Valley. But that's my comment. Martin, you heard the question.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more how you work on innovation?
Yeah, sure. First, we have to define innovation, right? Make this rather quickly. because I hesitated to use the term innovation for a long time. However, now I'm using it, but in the sense of exponential innovation, right? So I do have my regular business with my R&D, right? So they're working on the portfolio, which is big work to keep your portfolio up to date, right? And they're doing some business development, which basically I define as adjacent markets from your core business. So that's R&D, right? But if I talk about innovation, and I do have a director innovation from July 1st, so I had to make, and it took me like half a year to come to that point. So I use innovation in the sense of exponential innovation. So how do we work? And there are basically two things. One is work with startups, like with startups, young companies in a very structured way. Because I do believe startups are great for monitoring technological trends, because in our case, most of them coming directly out of university. I can buy 30 years of government funded research with a startup, right? I've done that because they bought the patents from the university. So that's interesting. And we try, I mean, every startup is treated on an individual basis. It's not just money, right? It's more like cooperation. It's a little bit of coaching. It's a learning from both sides. So that's startups is one thing, which is important to me in my innovation management. And the other is, as I said, working on ideas which do not fit your current scope of business. And this I call exponential, right? I mean, exponentially in that way, they're outside of your core business. You might have heard of these two terms, exploit and explore. So that's the exploration side. And I mean, I think you might know the situation. There's a great idea in your company, and you ask yourself, who should take care of it? So you ask R&D, and your R&D guys have no time. They don't have the right mindset. So that's going straight to my innovation lab. And that's their job, right? To deal with some new ideas. And Mario, differently from all these large corporates, I have guys who can really do hardware, right? So actually in our lab, there's not just desks. There's really equipment to do MVPs, right? To build MVPs. And in our world, MVP is always, there's hardware involved, right? It's not just the software. So we're building stuff and we're testing it. We use the lean startup method by Eric Ries, which we adapted to hardware. And we've done that a couple of times, working on a playbook, how to deal with ideas, because interestingly in innovation, you have to be efficient. It might be a little bit contradictory but you have so many ideas, you have to focus your resources on the most promising ones, right? So to bury ideas is the hard stuff. You need to bury them very early and tell the people who have them why, right? Because they have the right to know. So yeah, that's basically the two parts we are doing. We had the digital unit separate. That might be interesting. It was linked to our IT department because it was basically focusing on internal processes rather than digital business models, something like that. So they were very operational. Honestly, a little bit too operational. So from January 1st, I want to merge them with my innovation unit. I will also create in Germany a new company called New.Degree. So it's a separate legal entity for innovation. And from January 1st, there will be 12 people working there. So that's not tiny, right? It's 12 people. And they're just doing innovation. So there's no revenue, right? It's just cost. It's a cost center. And if they have a great idea, they can sell it to somebody. That's interesting. It can be anybody, but it can be also a company in our own group of companies, right? They sell their idea and then they get royalties for their idea. So there's a potential source of income, but as you know, it's very vague. And it will come in just a few years, right? When the idea is launched into the market.
That's a great idea.
Thanks. Yeah, you need to finance that stuff. It's not easy, also for taxes, because I mean, literally, most of our people work in Germany. So the money comes from Germany to make it easy. Most of it comes from Germany, but we are sending it to the US. German tax authorities don't like that because we're reducing our taxes in Germany and like send it over the pond, right? So the business model behind it is pretty profound to be accepted by tax authorities.
How big is the relation between the size of the normal company and the innovation part?
Yeah, I mean, we were 520 people, and there will be 12 people in innovation,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Innovation, how I define it. If you without R&D, right? If you take R&D, then there's maybe 80 or 90 people, right? Or so every fifth employee is in innovation. But in a narrow sense, as I explained it, it's like 10.
Okay.
These 12 people are located in California and Silicon Valley, or?
No, that's. I mean, I started with three people, which is not too bad. I mean, there are larger companies who have just one guy, like an outpost, right, who is actually doing nothing rather than drinking coffee. I drank a lot of coffee in Silicon Valley. But we had three people, and I had really issues to find the director of innovation. I'm very straightforward because salary level is very high in Silicon Valley, you know that, and that's also one reason is other costs of living, obviously. So I went one range up, a little bit more than I felt comfortable with, but the quality of the manager was not what I expected. So literally, I pay less in Germany and get better quality. So I decided to locate the manager here in Würzburg. But we are spread over Germany. So our startup manager is based in Dresden, which is a pretty interesting city for technology, by the way. Everybody knows the TU Munich, but TU Dresden is pretty interesting for us. And then I'm also will open an outpost in Berlin. There's a project called Maschinenhaus by Fissmann. And they're focusing on SME Mittelstand companies, and that's a pretty. I mean, it's a very posh place, honestly. Coming from a startup world with all the old rugs, it's a plug and play, Mario, all these shitty places in downtown San Francisco. I think you have a smell how innovation should like. Now they have all these Vitra chairs and it's all polished, but it's a good approach, and I might join them in Berlin. So we want to be present at various spots in Germany, right? And with all the virtual office world, it's possible. I mean, the 9 hours time difference is a bit of a challenge sometimes, but it's okay. We can deal with that.
Do you exchange the people there between California and Germany? Because I think that the mindset there is completely different in the Silicon Valley than in Germany, right?
That was my plan from the beginning. And I asked anybody who likes to go to Silicon Valley, just send me a message. And there were 2 people who volunteered. And honestly, we had visa issues. It's a conflict, right, to send people to Silicon Valley. The only way to do it is illegal. I know how to do it, but it's very difficult to tell your employees to do illegal stuff, right? So, and if you do it legally, I mean, Mario, maybe you have a way I have not approached yet, but if you want a E2 visa, it's like $5,000. So it's a little, so it was difficult, right? We sent them over for like a week or so, or for 2 weeks, but not for a longer term, for a longer period, right? So I even wanted to open like a house or an apartment to accommodate my German folks. But that was like a little bit of an illusion. It's not so easy to exchange people back and forth. And it's super expensive to send people to Silicon Valley also, right?
We are already out of time. We are past 11. If anyone wants to continue the conversation, I posted the email, Gunther's email in the chat window, and I think Nikki will send around an email with more information. You also have the recording of the talk. We recorded it, Gunther. I hope that is okay with you. We just
Absolutely.
Because we have some people who are not joining or cannot join for some conflicts. With that, thank you very much, Gunther, for jumping in on short notice and giving us a very interesting insight into that. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today and being with us. There's 3 sessions. You have now an evening or night ahead of you, depending on where you're located. My day just starts. So thank you very much, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you, Gunther.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Just bye.
Gunther, I've sent you an email.
And thank
Yeah.
you, Mary, for hosting.
Thank you,
Thanks
Mario.
for accepting me. Thanks for your attention. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.